Okay, so we live in this world where a large proportion of economists, perhaps most economists, believe in what's called the sticky wages and prices model. Okay, that in the long run, yeah, but in the short run, wages and prices are sticky. If we were a chemist, we would have come up with some, mile-long term to, call this stuff, but we're economists and we have no creativity and no sense of frolic, and so we just call it sticky wages and prices. Okay, sticky, like we're eating peanut butter. Why? Well, a very obvious reason is a contract. Workers with contracts, generally speaking, won't just take a pay cut. So if you go to your workers at Outback, you're the manager at Outback, and you go to the workers and go, hey, I'm going to have to cut your hours, I'm going to have to cut your pay back because we're having a recession, there's not much they can do about it. When you come to university professors and you say, hey, we're going to cut your pay, the last time the regents tried that, we went, no, we have contracts. Since then, they've changed our contract so that they can cut pay a certain way in a certain amount and for a certain amount of time, and there's limits on it, but they changed the contract so that they can change our pay. When the 2007-8-9 recession happened, the firefighters in Clark County refused to take a pay cut, even though the budget in Clark County was horrible. The firefighters said, nope, we're not helping you out, we're not taking a pay cut, you got to keep paying us. Okay, and it was 2 years later when their contract expired that they had to renegotiate the contract for lower wages. All right, so people with contracts. Number two, we already talked about efficiency wages. Talk about that again. If a recession starts, do I want to just whack everybody's salary? That's no. Why not? Because I have workers that are better than other workers. I probably have some really good workers in my business, and then I have some other people that, I need the bodies, but they're really not that good a worker. Well, during bad times, would I rather cut my payroll 10% by lowering everybody's pay 10% or by firing one of my workers? Yeah, I'm going to fire one of my workers. That way I decide who. I'm going to take my worst worker and I'm going to get rid of them. If I cut everybody's pay, my best worker might go to across the street and start competing against me. I don't want that. How do I keep my best workers? How do I keep them productive? How do I keep their morale up? I say, you guys are staying here. I'm paying you. Don't worry about your jobs. You're in. These other workers over here, you go, hey, I have to let you go. I have to cut your hours. I have to, right? And that way, you keep the best workers happy, you keep your company productive, you keep those workers in your shop. We call that efficiency wage theory. And that's a reason why wages might be sticky. Wages might stay high. Then there's something called menu costs. This relates to prices. If you have to make a new menu all the time, that costs money. Costs money to change prices. Not in every business, and as the technology improves, there's less and less of this. But, it used to be the grocery stores put the price of everything on everything. Well, all of it is really expensive to change prices. Okay? It's not so expensive anymore. If you're McDonald's and you have, the things that go up in the ceiling and they have the prices printed on them, every time you change your prices, that's really expensive because you got thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of stores and you have to put new signs in all of them. Okay? So that can make prices sticky. And consumers just like it when prices don't change. Okay? There's an information cost involved in figuring out what the price of things are. So consumers, it turns out, are very happy to know what the price is. I know what my Starbucks is going to cost in the morning, and I'm happy with that. Starbucks probably should raise the price of their beverages if economic theory was economic theory, if microeconomics really was right. Starbucks should raise their price a couple cents a month. Right? Every month you should get a couple cents increase. But that's not what they do. They wait a year and a half, then raise your price 30 cents. Right? They figure that those one-time increases, you'll be mad for a few days and then you move on. And then you go back to having a year and a half where you know exactly what the price is again. Okay? Consumers do not like uncertainty when it comes to their prices. Okay. short-run aggregate supply. So this is the real reason this graph is different than regular supply and demand is there's two supply curves. There's a long-run supply curve and a short-run supply curve. So what shifts the supply curve in the short run? Well, changes in the quantity of labor and capital. That's the same thing that affects the long-run curve. Changes in technology. Well, that's also something that affects the long-run curve. So the first two things here affect both the long-run aggregate supply and the short-run aggregate supply. But then SRAS is shifted by adjustments of wages to changing prices. Okay? Let me explain how SRAS works. Okay? If I'm a business and prices are going up and I can raise the price of my product, do I instantly run out and raise my workers' wages? Ask this question again. You're a business person. You own a small business. Your price of your product's going up and up and up and up really quick. Do you immediately go to your workers and raise prices raise their wages to match? Or do you capture all that extra money as extra profit? Yeah, we capture all that extra money as extra profit. That's what we do. Okay? So, in the short run, as prices go up, wages are probably going to go up more slowly because the business does not have an incentive to raise them right away. So prices go up, wages don't go up, profits go up. When profits go up, I want to produce a lot more. That's why this short-run aggregate supply curve looks the way it does, because the change in price is not matched by an increase in the wage. There's more profits to be made for now. Eventually, that wage is going to come up, and I'm not going to want to produce more because I'm not making the money anymore. All right? So adjustments of wages. But eventually, the wages are going to adjust, and that will change the way aggregate supply looks, short-run aggregate supply. Okay? And then we also have something called a supply shock. An example of a supply shock is an unexpected change to resource prices, natural resource prices. So if the price of oil has collapsed in 2020, that's a positive supply shock. Okay, that's for most businesses and most people, that's nice. The price of gas went way down. If the price of gas goes to $6 a gallon in 2021 and we didn't see that coming, that's going to be a negative supply shock, a bad shock. So we can have these supply shocks that affect us and move the short-run aggregate supply curve. So this is a short-run aggregate supply curve. Looks like a regular not aggregate supply curve. It has the price level on the y-axis and real GDP on the x-axis. And again, it's not straight up and down. And it's not straight up and down because either prices are going up faster than wages or prices are going down faster than wages. And the disconnect between wages and prices either increases my profits temporarily or decreases my profits temporarily. And I get a supply curve that looks like that, has a slope to it. Okay? Hopefully we got that. You can rewind me and replay me saying that like 8 times if you have to. Or read your book. So again, this is short-run aggregate supply. All right. So now I have 2 short-run aggregate supplies. Short-run aggregate supply increased from line 1 to line 2. Increased from line 1 to line 2, and it increased real GDP. Yes? Well, how could that happen? Well, we might have wages going down. We might have more workers all of a sudden. We might have more capital or improved technology or anything on that list that's a positive moves us out. Okay? Beautiful? Yeah. All right. So this is AD and SRS taken together. There's no LRAS for now. We'll eventually put a third line on this graph, and I know that you will be very excited by that thought of that third line. Okay? SRAS and AD together. That means there's an equilibrium price level and an equilibrium value of real GDP. There's a place where The amount that businesses want to produce is equal to the amount that consumers want to buy for the country as a whole, and that's equilibrium. That's where these two lines meet. Okay? So let's play some games here. So what happens if aggregate demand goes up? There's a story to tell. So aggregate demand increases. The businesses decide the world's beautiful, and they go out and they invest a ton. Well, as they invest a ton, what happens? Aggregate demand changes from AD to AD2. That investment increases real GDP, but it also increases prices. Okay? Is that exciting? Yeah, I thought you'd like that. All right, so we cut back on investment, and a recession happens. All right, so investment cuts back, a recession happens. What's going on? Well, aggregate demand's moving down, right? So we started here, goes that way. We got a new aggregate demand caused by investment falling. Real GDP falls, so we probably have a recession. And prices fall. Do you remember when we looked at those graphs of real GDP back in chapter 8? And every recession that's happened in the last 50 years that we looked at, and we could have gone back further and the same thing would be true, prices fall during recessions. Okay? They just fall during recessions. Well, prices don't necessarily have to fall. Inflation gets less severe. So in the 80s, it's not that prices fell. In the 70s, it's not that prices fell. It's that inflation was high and inflation went way down during the recession. Okay? So down it goes. Got that? So here's aggregate supply increasing. That means it went this way. Right? That's the increase. That's aggregate supply going up is moving to the right. It's always moving to the right. This is the best thing in the world because if aggregate supply increases, GDP goes up, which means more people have jobs and work is better, and prices go down. So we get more stuff at lower prices. Okay? This is, again, there's this theory called supply-side economics that you hear about all the time. This is why what they're hoping for in that theory is to move aggregate supply to the right, which gives us better GDP and lower prices all at the same time. And then the last one is the bad move in aggregate supply. If aggregate supply moves to the left, okay, what's going to happen? Well, prices are going to go up and we're going to have a recession. So when aggregate supply falls, everything bad happens. We could have an increase in prices and a recession at the same time. Now, we haven't seen that, have we? Okay? A change in aggregate supply could indirectly cause a recession, which it did in the 70s, where the first thing that happened was aggregate supply moved, but then aggregate demand moved. Okay? But it's possible that we could have a recession where prices actually go up, and that would be caused by aggregate supply. Okay, so now I add LRAS to this graph. The economy is always at the point where SRAS crosses AD. So that red dot right there, that's where the economy is. The economy is always where SRAS is. So you find SRAS here, and AD, and that's where the economy is. Where it should be is on LRAS. That's potential GDP. That's natural. So we should be here. We're here. Now what happens if we're there? Again, how did we get there? Well, we probably got there because prices went down, again, in this theory, prices went down and wages didn't. So what we need to happen is for wages to fall, right? So this happened because prices are sticky, or wages are sticky. How long does it take? What happens? Well, the SRAS should move. Okay? And it shouldn't be the government that makes it move. The market should make the SRAS move, and we end up right there where we're supposed to be. Why? Well, if prices need to be lower and they're sticky, eventually they'll go down. If wages need to be lower and they're sticky, eventually they'll come down. And that adjustment process shifts the SRAS out and gets us to equilibrium on the LRAS. So this theory says, look, in the short run, we could be messed up. We could have a really bad recession and be sitting here in the short run. In the long run, the market will fix that. The system will fix that. The government doesn't have to do it, the Fed, in the long run. So the argument, and you see this argument playing out today between, Republicans and Democrats in the Senate and the House, where the Republicans are saying, let's wait and see if it starts fixing itself. And the Democrats are like, it's not going to fix itself anytime soon. We need to fix it. So there's an argument about how long it would take to fix itself if we left it alone. And the Republicans are kind of hoping that it wouldn't take long to fix itself. The Democrats are like, no, we're sure it's going to take a long time. Okay? So if you don't know for sure, then you could have an argument about whether or not you should let the market solve the problem. Is that fun? I thought so. All right. Again, what this means is that the economy will get to full employment. The economy will get rid of a recession without the government intervening in the long run. How long is that? I don't know. Nobody else knows. So usually when little bitty recessions happen, we figured that it'll work itself out. A lot. Not always, but we usually figure that we don't know anything about it. Big recessions happen. The theory is that the government needs to act because it's going to take too long for the system to fix itself. But this is fundamental argument that plays out in Congress all the time. Okay? We want to be at the new dot, not the old dot. And how do we get there? Okay, just some ideas of what happens in aggregate demand and supply. Here we are. GDP's at 10 trillion. There's 100, prices are at 100. The government says, oh, things aren't good. We need to pass a stimulus. We need to do something to increase. And so they go out and they do what they did in 2020 and spend a lot of money to stimulate the economy. That will shift aggregate demand to the right. It will stimulate real GDP. Jobs will be created. Income will be created. But it will also raise prices. Okay? It will also raise prices. In theory, again, in this theory. Whether we're not seeing that in 2020, we're not seeing that in the real world. But in theory, that's what would happen. All right? What if the Federal Reserve increases the money supply? Well, the same thing. And as you sit in 2020 and there's a recession going on, the 2020 recession, the Federal Reserve increases the money supply and tries to create jobs and stimulate the economy. The counter argument to that is it should make prices go up, according to this theory. And maybe. What happens if investment goes down? Aggregate demand moves to the left. Real GDP is going to go down. People are going to lose their jobs. And prices should go down. Okay? So, before I do that, come back here. How are we going to get to understand this and really get it? We got to play with it, right? We have to practice. So there's practice stuff you can do in your book and stuff, and you need to do that and try this over and over again and see until you can draw the right line in the right place and explain what it means. All right. Our buddy John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run, we are all dead. He didn't think it makes sense to wait around for the long run to fix your economic problems. He thought you should just go out and your economic problems should fix themselves. There shouldn't be waiting going on here. Okay? But what's it mean to be in the long run here? Let's look. So I got rid of SRAS. I only have LRAS. What happens if I increase AD now? Think about it in your mind. Do you got it pictured? You understand what's going to happen? Yeah. If I increase aggregate demand in the long run, all I get is inflation. All that happens is prices go up. Okay? Classical dichotomy, the separation of the real and the nominal. In this theory, in the long run, the only thing the government can do, the only thing the Federal Reserve can do is to cause inflation. In the short run, they might be able to affect the economy. They might be able to create jobs and make the economy, better off. But in the long run, all they can do is cause inflation. Okay? What happens if I increase LRS? Well, if I increase LRAS, I get an increase in real GDP, an increase in jobs, and I also get lower prices. So increasing LRAS does everything good and nothing bad. Increasing AD does nothing good and everything bad in the long run. Okay? In this theory, behind this theory, that's what it says. Okay. So, hopefully we all got that. And now we're going to go off and talk about money.